pollinator, a ladybird, and a bunch of native British wildflowers, aka weeds, or plants that aren't on the guest list. What we're going to be doing in answer to a question I was sent is, yes, composting weeds. It can be done. Ideally, you don't want to do what I've done and wait for the weeds to go to seed, because as well as obviously distributing their seeds everywhere else and you getting all weeds, we don't want them germinating in our compost and using up all the nutrients just to become more weeds. So you're going to want to identify the different types of weeds that you might have. That is also, by the way, a good way of indicating what kind of soil you have. Another topic for another day, perhaps. But we are dealing with mat forming sometimes. We might have rhizomatous or deep-rooted weeds, and yes, they even can be composted as well. I tend to use my hori knife. You can see it's not particularly sharp, but I do need to stop forgetting I've got it in my holster and going to supermarkets. But I haven't been arrested yet. When you are prizing out these roots, try and get as much of the root ball as you can. And what I tend to find with things like this annual meadow grass is that once you've got the roots out, you can see that the soil behind is quite poor and crumbly, but that's great for sowing straight back into. And you can, chuck some poppy seeds or some cornflower seeds in that poor crumbly soil that you've left behind. I actually sometimes leave meadow grass in certain places because, to be honest, it's better the devil you know sometimes, and if they're forming a quite useful mat in an area, that's going to stop other weeds potentially colonising that space until I actually want to do something with it. So, I'm not against having these plants here, but you can see how easy this is. When you are dealing with deep-rooted or rhizomatous plants like ground elder, which I have lots of. Thank you, the Romans, by the way. I'm not making pesto out of this, but apparently you can. Or bracken, which is just, to be honest, impossible to get rid of. Just snap those off and you can compost them. You're looking at a bunch of different weeds that are going to tell you a lot about your soil, but it's all doable. None of this is chemical. Anyway, we are going to compost either at temperature. Now, you can see my hot bin is only at 20 degrees according to the top thermometer, which is usually wrong, but I think today it actually is between 20 and 30 degrees. Things aren't composting fast, but underneath this layer there is actually some good compost going on. But you can see some shoots are coming out of the old potato peelings. That's fine, just break them up. And once we start adding in some more nitrogen, it will be fine, it will get hot. You can use the leachate. There's a little tap at the bottom of these things, so I just collect the leachate and that can be diluted and poured into your plants, so that's great stuff. But for the others, to be honest, I mix them all up. And I very often will just use old compost bags and keep them warm and, somewhere in the sun, but with some water in. And I literally just forget them. So I stack them up like a kind of wall. They will compost. Everything will if it's organic. But when you've got these deep rooted, so for example, this dandelion, I would probably recommend that you either incinerate them in an incinerator bin or a good hot bonfire, or you could just rip the leaves off and compost those, and then the roots could go in municipal composting, or I wouldn't expect you to line up 500 dandelions and use a kitchen blowtorch like I am here, but you can see that what we're doing here is creating cell damage so that the roots cannot start rooting again in new compost. But to be honest, I tend to just chuck things wherever. So yes, I might keep these roots and chuck them straight into a bonfire. But even in a hot bin, it can get up to 70 degrees in there. So even then it should be fine. With most of my composted weeds, they just go into this big long trench that I have, and I top that up with some ready-made compost that I already have, and then I can plant into it. So squashes, potatoes, love all this because underneath this ready-made compost is a layer of materials that is still composting, so it's quite warm. I found these Apaches that I'd forgotten about, so they're going in. I hope this has been useful to you. See you soon.